I never imagined that installing a doorbell camera to check on my own forgetfulness would reveal that my son and his fiancée were planning to have me declared mentally incompetent. When I finally reviewed the footage 3 days later, I discovered I wasn't losing my mind at all. I was being systematically drugged. My name is Robert Chen, and at 72 years old, I thought I'd seen enough of life to not be surprised anymore. I was wrong. It started about 6 months after my wife Lynn passed away from cancer. We'd been married for 47 years, and her death left a hole in my life that I didn't know how to fill. Our home in Richmond Hill, just north of Toronto, suddenly felt enormous and empty. The garden Lynn had lovingly tended seemed to mock me with its overgrown beds and withered flowers. My son David was my only child. At 43, he'd recently gone through a messy divorce that left him financially drained. His ex-wife had gotten the house in Vancouver, and the legal fees had apparently wiped out most of his savings. I didn't know all the details because David had always been private about his finances, even as a kid. About 4 months after Lynn died, David called me with news that lifted my spirits. He'd met someone. Her name was Amber Whitmore, and from the way he described her, she sounded perfect. 38 years old, a certified financial advisor, beautiful, kind, and most importantly, she made David happy again. I first met Amber on a Sunday afternoon in late September. David brought her over for dinner, and I'd spent the entire morning preparing Lynn's famous pot roast, even though I'd never quite mastered it the way she had. When they arrived, Amber breezed in wearing an expensive-looking cream-colored suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a perfect bun. She hugged me warmly. Her perfume was overwhelming, something floral and cloying that made my nose itch, but I smiled and welcomed her in. During dinner, Amber asked all the right questions. How was I coping? Was the house too much to manage alone? Had I thought about my future care needs? At the time, I appreciated her concern. She seemed genuinely interested in my well-being, and I could see why David had fallen for her. But then small things started happening, things I couldn't quite explain. It began with my keys. I'd always been meticulous about keeping them in the same place, a small ceramic bowl by the front door that Lynn had made in a pottery class. But I started finding them in odd places. On the kitchen counter, in the bathroom, once, inexplicably, in the refrigerator. Then it was my wallet. I'd put it in my jacket pocket, and an hour later, it would be on my bedside table. I started to worry. Was this how it began? My father had developed dementia in his 80s, and the early signs had been just like this. Memory lapses, misplaced items, confusion about time and place. I mentioned it to David during one of his weekly check-in calls. His concern seemed genuine, but looking back now, I can see it was the beginning of their plan. By November, the incidents were happening more frequently. I'd forget appointments I was certain I'd never made. I'd find notes in my own handwriting that I had no memory of writing. Most troubling of all, I started having episodes where I'd lose chunks of time. I'd sit down to read the morning paper, and suddenly it would be afternoon, with hours simply gone. David suggested I see a doctor, and I agreed. Dr. Patricia Morrison had been our family physician for 20 years. She ran a battery of tests, cognitive assessments, blood work. Everything came back normal. She told me it was likely stress and grief manifesting as forgetfulness, common in widowers my age. She recommended grief counseling and suggested I consider not living alone. That's when Amber really stepped into the picture. She started coming by the house regularly, sometimes with David, often alone. She'd bring groceries, help with housework, sit and chat with me about Lynn and the old days. She was charming and attentive, and I found myself looking forward to her visits. She made the house feel less empty. In early December, Amber brought up the idea of updating my home security. She'd read an article, she said, about elderly people being targeted by scammers and home invaders. Richmond Hill was generally safe, but you could never be too careful. Why not install a doorbell camera? That way, I'd be able to see who was at the door before answering, and David could check in on me remotely if I didn't answer my phone. It seemed like a thoughtful suggestion. David ordered one online, and he installed it himself one Saturday afternoon. He showed me how it worked, how it would record anyone who came to the door, how I could review footage on my phone. But I was never very good with technology. The app confused me, and after David left, I mostly forgot about it. What I didn't know was that the camera's field of view extended into my living room through the window beside the door. And I definitely didn't know that David had quietly disabled the motion notifications on my phone so I wouldn't be alerted to recordings. The week before Christmas, things got worse. I started having terrible headaches and bouts of dizziness. My hands would shake uncontrollably. I'd feel foggy and confused, sometimes for hours at a time. Dr. Morrison ran more tests. Again, nothing conclusive. She suggested it might be my blood pressure medication and adjusted the dosage. But the symptoms continued. On December 20th, David and Amber came over for what they called a serious conversation. We sat in the living room, the Christmas tree I'd half-heartedly decorated, blinking its multicolored lights in the corner. David held my hand and spoke gently, like I was a child. He was worried about me, he said. The forgetfulness was getting worse. I'd called him 3 times the previous week asking the same question. I'd left the stove on twice. Just yesterday, I'd apparently invited the mailman in for coffee and told him rambling stories about the war, even though I'd never served in any war. I didn't remember any of this. The gaps in my memory were terrifying. Amber leaned forward, her expression full of sympathy. She'd been doing some research, she explained, and she really thought I should consider a long-term care assessment. There were wonderful facilities in the area, places where I'd be safe, where trained staff could monitor me 24 hours a day. I felt my chest tighten. A nursing home? I was only 72. I still drove, still managed my own affairs, still lived independently. This seemed extreme. But David was persistent. He'd already made an appointment with a geriatric psychiatrist for January 5th. Dr. Ronald Pemberton, apparently the best in the city. Just for an assessment, David assured me. No decisions would be made without my input. Reluctantly, I agreed. After they left that night, I sat alone in the dark living room, the weight of mortality pressing down on me. Was this really happening? Was I losing myself the same way my father had? The thought terrified me more than death itself. The next morning, December 21st, I woke with another splitting headache. I stumbled to the kitchen for coffee and knocked over the bottle of pills by the sink. My blood pressure medication scattered across the counter. As I gathered them up, something made me pause. The pills looked different. Same bottle, same label, but the pills themselves seemed slightly smaller, a different shade of white. I held one up to the light, turning it over in my fingers. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe this was more evidence of my deteriorating mind. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I spent most of that day in a fog, but by evening, my head had cleared somewhat. I was sitting in my recliner, trying to focus on the hockey game, when I remembered the doorbell camera. David had said it would record everything. When had I last checked it? I fumbled with my phone, searching for the app. It took me 20 minutes to remember the password, but eventually, I got it open. The interface was confusing, full of icons and menus I didn't understand, but I managed to navigate to the recording history. There were dozens of clips. Hundreds, maybe. I started playing them randomly, fast-forwarding through footage of delivery drivers and neighbors walking by. Then I found one from 3 days ago, December 18th. The timestamp read 2:15 in the afternoon. I pressed play. The video showed Amber arriving at my door. She let herself in with a key I didn't remember giving her. The camera angle caught her as she moved through the foyer toward the kitchen. She was carrying her large leather purse and looking around carefully, as if checking to make sure she was alone. I watched, confused, as she disappeared into the kitchen. The video continued recording the empty hallway for several minutes. Then Amber reappeared, moving quickly toward the door. She paused to look at something on the hall table, picked up an envelope, examined it, then put it back. Then she left. Why had she come by when I wasn't home? Or had I been home and not remembered? I scrolled through more recordings, my heart beginning to pound. December 16th, 1:40 p.m. Amber again, letting herself in, staying for 20 minutes. December 13th, 11:30 a.m. December 9th. Every few days, she came to the house when David wasn't with her. I found a recording from December 14th that made my blood run cold. The timestamp was 3:20 p.m. The video showed both David and Amber arriving. I heard the door open and their voices, though the audio was tinny and hard to make out. I turned the volume up as loud as it would go and held the phone close to my ear. Amber's voice, "Did you switch them?" David's voice, quieter, harder to hear. "Yeah, this morning. Same bottle, he'll never notice." "What about the dosage?" "Dr. Chen said his tolerance might be." "It's fine. Half a tablet in his coffee is enough. By next week, he'll be so confused he won't be able to dress himself. My hand started shaking so violently I nearly dropped the phone. I replayed the clip 3 times, each time hoping I'd misheard, that my failing mind was playing tricks on me. But their words were clear. They were drugging me. I sat there in the darkness of my living room, the television still playing its game to an audience of none, trying to process what I'd just heard. My son, my only child, the boy I'd raised, the man I'd taught to ride a bike and throw a baseball and stand up for what was right. He was poisoning me. But why? I forced myself to keep watching the recordings. I needed to understand. The video from December 14th continued. I watched David and Amber move through my house like they owned it. The camera didn't capture everything, but the audio picked up fragments of their conversation. Amber, the appointment with Pemberton is set for January 5th. I've already briefed him on the symptoms. David, you're sure he'll sign off on the assessment? Trust me. I've worked with him before. Once he sees Robert in person, confused and disoriented, he'll recommend immediate guardianship, especially when I show him the documentation. What documentation? The incidents I've been recording. Your father inviting strangers in, leaving appliances on, the erratic behavior. I've kept detailed notes. There was a pause. Then David's voice, quieter, almost guilty. You really think this is the only way? David? Amber's voice was sharp now, no longer the sweet, caring tone she used with me. We've been over this. Your father is sitting on a $2 million property and another $1 million in investments. Once he's declared incompetent and you have guardianship, we can sell this place, liquidate his assets, and start fresh. Your divorce wiped you out. We need this. I know, but nothing. He's 72. He could live another 15 years in some care facility, burning through money on nursing staff. This way, we secure your inheritance now, while there's still something left. And honestly, given his age and the grief, he probably does need professional care eventually. We're just accelerating the timeline. I had to pause the video. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like someone was standing on it. This wasn't about concern for my well-being. This was about money. My money. They were manufacturing a mental illness to have me declared incompetent so they could take everything. I thought about Lynn, about the years we'd worked and saved, about the life insurance policy she'd insisted on that had paid off the house. We'd built this nest egg together so I'd be secure in my old age, so I'd never be a burden to David. And he was stealing it. I spent the rest of the night watching every single recording on that camera. By 4 a.m., I had the full picture. The pattern had started in early November. Amber would come by when I was out running errands or during my afternoon nap, which I'd recently started taking because of the overwhelming fatigue. She'd switch things around, move my keys, hide my wallet, place items in strange locations. She'd take my appointment book and change dates, making it look like my handwriting. She'd even called Dr. Morrison's office pretending to be me, making appointments I knew nothing about, then calling back to cancel them erratically to establish a pattern of confusion. And the pills. I watched David switch out my blood pressure medication for something else. I couldn't tell what from the video, but based on my symptoms, the dizziness, confusion, tremors, time loss, I'd guess some kind of sedative, or possibly an antipsychotic in small doses. They'd been gaslighting me for months, systematically making me believe I was losing my mind. I found one more video that completed the picture. December 19th, just 2 days ago. David and Amber again, in my living room, speaking quietly while they thought I was asleep upstairs. Amber was holding papers. These are the power of attorney documents. Once Pemberton signs the competency assessment, we file these. You'll have full control over his finances by the end of January. And then we list this house immediately. The market's hot right now. We should clear $1.8 million easily after fees. His investment portfolio transfers to the trust I've set up, with you as the sole trustee. We can draw from it as needed. What about Dad? Where does he go? Maple Grove has a bed available. It's not the Ritz, but it's clean and adequately staffed. The monthly fee is $3,500. Very reasonable. Amber, David's voice cracked. I know this was my idea, but seeing him like this, so confused and scared, David. Her voice was firm. You're not backing out now. We're in too deep. Besides, you said yourself he was starting to decline anyway. We're not doing anything that wouldn't happen naturally in a few years. We're just helping things along." I heard David sigh on the recording. "Yeah, you're right. I just wish there was another way." There isn't. Now, let's go over the story one more time. When was the first time you noticed his memory problems? I watched them rehearse their lies. Every confused incident, every forgetful moment, every piece of evidence they'd manufactured to paint me as incompetent. As the winter sun began to rise on December 22nd, I sat in my kitchen with a notepad, my mind clearer than it had been in weeks. I'd stopped taking my medication immediately after watching the videos. The fog was already beginning to lift. I had just under 2 weeks before the appointment with Dr. Pemberton, 2 weeks to figure out how to stop this and protect myself. But I needed to be smart. David and Amber couldn't know that I knew. The first thing I did was drive to a walk-in clinic in Markham, far enough from Richmond Hill that I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. I brought my pill bottle and told the doctor I thought there might have been a pharmacy error. The pills didn't look right. Dr. Sarah Kim, a young physician who looked fresh out of medical school, examined the pills carefully. She had them tested at the lab. 3 hours later, she called me back to her office, her expression grave. The pills were lorazepam, a benzodiazepine used to treat anxiety. Strong stuff. The dosage in each pill was 2 milligrams. If someone had been giving me even half a tablet daily without my knowledge, combined with my actual blood pressure medication, it would explain every symptom I'd been experiencing. Confusion, memory loss, dizziness, time distortion. Dr. Kim asked if I wanted to file a police report. I told her not yet. I needed more evidence first. She prescribed me my actual blood pressure medication from a pharmacy I'd never used before. She also gave me information about elder abuse hotlines and strongly urged me to seek help. I thanked her and left. My next stop was a lawyer's office. I'd never used Ronald Pemberton's services before, but I knew him by reputation, so I went elsewhere. A small firm in downtown Toronto, Murray & Associates, came highly recommended by a friend from my old engineering days. Janet Murray was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense. I laid out everything for her. The videos, the fake medication, the plan to have me declared incompetent. I asked her what my options were. She was quiet for a long time after I finished speaking. Then she said something that chilled me. "Mr. Chen, this is far more common than you'd think. Financial exploitation of the elderly is an epidemic. Adult children, caregivers, new spouses, the perpetrators are often the people the victim trusts most." Janet explained that I had several options. I could go to the police immediately with the evidence. They could press charges for fraud, forgery, possibly attempted theft, depending on what else they uncovered. But criminal cases moved slowly, and in the meantime, David and Amber might escalate their plans or destroy evidence. Or I could take a different approach, document everything, build an ironclad case, and confront them when they thought they'd won. Then we'd see if David was redeemable or if he'd gone too far. I chose the latter. Over the next 2 weeks, I played my part. I continued to act confused, forgetful, disoriented. It wasn't hard. I'd spent months watching myself decline into someone I didn't recognize. Now I just had to perform that same decline deliberately. But secretly, I was documenting everything. I kept the doorbell camera running and backed up all recordings to a cloud service Janet had set up for me. I photographed the fake pills. I wrote down every interaction with David and Amber, noting their questions, their suggestions, their lies. I also did something else. I researched Amber Whitmore. It took some digging, but what I found made everything fall into place. Amber had been married before, twice, actually. Her first husband, Graham Whitmore, was 78 years old when he died in a nursing home in Calgary 3 years ago. He'd signed over power of attorney to Amber 6 months before his death. His children from his first marriage contested the will, claiming Amber had manipulated their father and stolen their inheritance. The case was settled out of court. Her second husband, Kenneth Porter, was 65 when he passed away just 14 months ago. Another contested will, another settlement. Amber had a pattern. She targeted older men with assets, usually men who were recently widowed or divorced. She'd charm them, isolate them from their families, gain their trust and legal control, then clean out their accounts. Sometimes the men died, sometimes they ended up in care facilities, too medicated to fight back. David wasn't her partner. He was her next victim, Or rather, I was the primary target, and David was the useful idiot who'd given her access to me. I brought this information to Janet. She contacted a colleague who specialized in fraud investigation. Within days, we had even more. Bank records showing unusual transfers from Porter's accounts before his death. Testimony from a former nurse at the Calgary facility who'd found Amber's behavior with Graham suspicious. A pattern of manipulation and financial exploitation spanning at least 5 years. Amber Whitmore was a predator, and my son had brought her straight to me. January 5th arrived. David picked me up for the appointment with Dr. Pemberton. I shuffled slowly to the car, mumbling about forgetting my glasses. I called David Dennis twice. I asked if we were going to see Dr. Morrison. I played the role of a confused, declining old man perfectly. In the car, Amber was waiting in the back seat. She squeezed my hand sympathetically. "Don't worry, Robert. Dr. Pemberton is wonderful. He's just going to ask you some questions." Dr. Pemberton's office was in a medical building in North York. The waiting room was full of elderly patients and their adult children, all wearing the same expression of patient concern, tinged with exhaustion. When my turn came, David and Amber both tried to come in with me. Dr. Pemberton, a thin man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses, allowed only David. Amber waited outside, her jaw tight with frustration. The assessment was thorough. Dr. Pemberton asked me to remember lists of words, draw clock faces, solve simple math problems. I deliberately made mistakes. Not too many. I wanted to seem like I was declining, not completely gone. I confused dates. I couldn't remember what I'd had for breakfast. I called Dr. Pemberton Dr. Morrison once. Throughout the session, David sat quietly, his face unreadable. Was that guilt I saw? Or just anxiety that his plan might not work? After an hour, Dr. Pemberton asked David to step out so he could speak with me privately. This was it. This was where he'd typically assess whether I needed a guardian, whether I could still make my own decisions. Dr. Pemberton leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Chen, I'm going to be frank with you. Your son has briefed me extensively on your symptoms. Miss Whitmore provided detailed documentation of incidents, wandering, confusion, dangerous behaviors. Based on today's assessment, I see some concerning signs: memory deficits, temporal disorientation, difficulty with executive function tasks." I nodded slowly, playing my role. He continued, "In cases like this, my recommendation would typically be to pursue a capacity assessment with the goal of establishing guardianship. Your son seems very concerned about your safety." "I see," I said quietly. Dr. Pemberton tapped his pen against his notebook. "However, I have to tell you something. Yesterday, I received a very interesting phone call from a colleague of mine, Janet Murray. She's a lawyer. She asked me some pointed questions about my professional relationship with Amber Whitmore. My heart skipped. This wasn't part of the plan. Janet and I had agreed to keep her involvement quiet until after this appointment. Dr. Pemberton looked at me intently. "Mr. Chen, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need you to be honest with me. Are you being coerced or manipulated by anyone in your life?" I held his gaze. This was the moment. I could continue the charade, or I could trust this man. I decided to trust him. "Yes," I said clearly, all trace of confusion gone from my voice. "My son and his fiancée have been drugging me for months. They switched my medication with benzodiazepines. They've been gaslighting me to make me appear incompetent so they can take control of my assets." Dr. Pemberton's expression didn't change, but I saw his grip tighten on his pen. "Do you have evidence of this?" "Extensive evidence. Video recordings, the fake medication, financial documentation of Miss Whitmore's past. My lawyer has everything." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Mr. Chen, I need to inform you that I have indeed worked with Miss Whitmore before. She's referred 3 clients to me in the past 2 years, all elderly men, all eventually placed under guardianship. At the time, I believed I was helping vulnerable people. Now, I'm questioning whether I was an unwitting participant in something much darker." He stood up. "I'm going to call your son and Miss Whitmore back in. I'm not going to recommend guardianship today. Instead, I'm going to suggest further testing at a different facility. This will buy you time. But Mr. Chen, you need to go to the police. Today." When David and Amber came back into the office, Dr. Pemberton delivered his verdict. He was concerned, he said, but not convinced that immediate guardianship was necessary. He wanted me to undergo additional assessment at a different facility, one that specialized in differentiating between genuine cognitive decline and other factors that might present similarly. He also recommended that I continue living independently for now, with increased family support. I watched Amber's face. Her professional mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw pure rage flicker across her features. But she recovered quickly, nodding and agreeing that yes, of course, more thorough testing was wise. David looked relieved, which told me he wasn't as far gone as I'd feared. We left the office. In the parking lot, Amber made an excuse about needing to make some calls and walked away toward her car. David helped me into his car, then sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. "Dad," he said quietly, not looking at me. "I'm sorry." "For what, son?" He was quiet for a long time. Then, "For not being strong enough to stop this sooner." My throat tightened. "David, what do you mean?" He turned to me, and I saw tears in his eyes. "I know you know, Dad. I saw you watching me the other night when you thought I was asleep. You were looking at your phone, at the doorbell camera footage. I saw your face. You know what we did. I didn't say anything." David continued, his voice breaking. "It started as just an idea. I was so broke after the divorce, and Amber suggested that maybe we could help you transition to a care facility a bit early, get your affairs in order. She made it sound reasonable, like we were helping you. But then it became more. The drugs, the gaslighting. Every time I wanted to stop, she'd remind me how much debt I was in, how this was my only way out. She manipulated you too," I said softly. "That's not an excuse. I'm 43 years old, not some kid. I knew what we were doing was wrong. I knew we were hurting you. I just wanted the money more than I wanted to be a good son." He wiped his eyes. "Mom would be ashamed of me." "Yes," I agreed. "She would be." We sat in silence. Finally, I said, "David, I need you to make a choice right now. You can walk away, get in that car with Amber, and try to salvage whatever future you've planned together. Or you can come with me to the police station and tell them everything. If you choose the first option, I will press charges, and you will go to jail. If you choose the second, there's a chance, a small one, that we can fix this." David looked at me, then at Amber's car across the parking lot. She was on her phone, pacing, probably already planning the next move. "I choose you, Dad," he whispered. "I choose to make this right." That afternoon, David and I walked into the Richmond Hill police station. We spent 6 hours giving statements. I provided the doorbell camera footage, the fake medication, all of Janet's documentation on Amber's history. David confessed to everything: the drugging, the gaslighting, the planned fraud. The police moved quickly. By evening, Amber Whitmore was arrested at her apartment. They found more evidence there. Documents from Graham Whitmore and Kenneth Porter's estates, forged signatures, a laptop full of incriminating emails, and financial records. It turned out she'd been working with a small network of accomplices. Dr. Pemberton wasn't one of them. He'd been an unwitting tool, but there were others. A lawyer who specialized in quickly processing estate transfers, a real estate agent who'd been ready to list my house, even a care facility administrator who'd been paid to keep quiet about suspiciously large numbers of residents signing over their assets to family members shortly before admission. The investigation eventually uncovered 7 victims over 5 years, millions of dollars stolen, lives destroyed. Amber was charged with fraud, theft, forgery, and elder abuse. The trial is still ongoing, but her lawyer has indicated she'll likely plead guilty in exchange for a lighter sentence. She's looking at 10 to 15 years. David was charged as an accessory, but because he'd cooperated fully and provided essential evidence, the Crown Attorney agreed to a plea deal. He received 2 years probation, a hefty fine, and is required to perform 500 hours of community service at an elder care advocacy organization. He also has to attend therapy weekly and take courses on financial literacy and ethics. We're slowly rebuilding our relationship. It's not easy. There are days when I look at him and all I can see is the man who drugged me, who was willing to steal my autonomy and my savings. But there are other days when I see my son, the boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and tell me they were the most beautiful flowers in the world. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal overnight. Maybe it never fully heals, but we're trying. I'm still in my house in Richmond Hill. I still drive, still manage my own affairs, still live independently. My mind is clear. The real blood pressure medication keeps me healthy, and I've taken some additional precautions now. I installed more cameras. I changed all my locks. I worked with Janet to set up an irrevocable trust that protects my assets. I joined a support group for victims of elder abuse, and I've started volunteering with an organization that helps other seniors recognize and escape financial exploitation. What happened to me happens to thousands of older adults every year. The perpetrators are usually family members, caregivers, or romantic partners, people we trust most. The signs aren't always obvious. Sometimes it starts small: borrowed money that's never repaid, new names added to bank accounts, pressure to sign documents without reading them carefully. If you're an older adult, please know this: you have the right to control your own money, your own property, your own life. If something feels wrong, trust that instinct. Document everything. Keep important documents in a safe place. Don't sign anything you don't fully understand. And tell someone you trust outside the situation if you're being pressured or manipulated. If you have aging parents, pay attention. Visit regularly. Ask questions about their finances, not to be nosy, but to make sure they're safe. Watch for sudden changes in their living situation, new people who've become very involved very quickly, or isolation from friends and family. Financial abuse thrives in silence and shame. The victims often don't report it because they're embarrassed or because the abuser is someone they love. We need to talk about this more openly, to remove the stigma, to make it easier for people to ask for help. I was lucky. I caught it in time. I had the resources to fight back. Not everyone does. Dr. Morrison still sees me for my regular checkups. She apologized for not catching the signs, but I don't blame her. The people who did this to me were skilled manipulators. They knew exactly what they were doing. As for David, he's rebuilding his life too. He got a job with a marketing firm, a real job with a salary and benefits. He's slowly paying off his debts the honest way. He calls me every Sunday, and sometimes we have coffee. Our conversations are still awkward, still careful, but they're real. Last week, he brought me flowers for Lynn's grave. We went together to the cemetery, something we hadn't done since her funeral. Standing there by her headstone, David broke down. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he whispered. "I'm so sorry for what I almost did. I promise I'll be better. I promise I'll take care of Dad the right way." I put my hand on his shoulder. Lynn would have wanted me to forgive him. She always believed in second chances, in the power of redemption. I'm trying to believe in it too. The cameras are still running at my house. I check them regularly now, but not because I'm paranoid. Because I'm careful. Because I learned that safety and trust aren't the same thing, and that it's okay to verify even when you want to believe. I'm 72 years old. I don't know how many more years I have, but I'm damn sure going to live them on my own terms. Nobody gets to take that from me again. To anyone reading this who sees themselves in my story, please reach out. Talk to a lawyer. Contact Adult Protective Services. Call the Elder Abuse Hotline. You don't have to face this alone. You don't deserve to be victimized by the people who should be protecting you. And to those of you who have aging parents or relatives, be vigilant, be involved, ask the hard questions. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is simply paying attention. What happened to me was a betrayal, but it was also a wake-up call. Not just for me, but hopefully for others. We need to protect our elders better. We need to listen when they tell us something is wrong. We need to create systems that make it harder for predators like Amber to operate. I'm working on that now. Advocacy, education, supporting legislation that strengthens protections for seniors. It's become my purpose in these later years of my life. Lynn used to say that we're not defined by what happens to us, but by what we do afterward. I'm choosing to do something. I'm choosing to make sure my experience wasn't in vain. If my story helps even one person recognize the signs or find the courage to seek help, then maybe, just maybe, something good can come from all of this.